All right. Hello and welcome to another episode of Construction Corner Podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host. And we do have a special guest today. But first, Matt, how are you, my blue collar badass?
I'm doing good. Good to be here. It's been a crazy busy week, and I'm having some technology problems. So if my audio sucks, I apologize in advance.
Hey, man, it happens. We're running real businesses here, not not just podcasting.
It's true. Absolutely true.
So with that today, guys, I and Matt have a special guest, Doug Maiden. Doug practiced architecture for 5 years before joining Beck Technology back in '98. So he's gonna hopefully give us tons of information on the history of the industry here, as I am much newer than '98 to the industry. But he began writing application-specific programs for the AEC industry, and then in 2001, wrote the specifications to the Destiny Profiler, commercial BIM application sold by Beck Technology since '06. And Doug is now responsible for organizational support services, including education and planning services, and an expert user, which I would hope so, of the Destiny Modeler and the suite, and lectures at numerous colleges and presents to trade associations and partners on the features and uses of the Destiny suite, and also the changes in the industry, which is a big portion of what we're going to talk about today, is technology. It's kind of past, present, and future. So Doug, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dylan, and thank you, Matt. And just a little bit of history. Matt and I have known each other probably since 2012, maybe. It's been a long time.
It's been darn near 10 years. I was trying to figure that out this morning.
Yeah, I think it was 10 years. So it's been an exciting journey to see how construction has moved forward. And I'm happy to share whatever insights that I've picked up along the way as well.
Well, we're glad to have you, Doug, and it's good to see you again, even if virtually. So I guess, why don't you give us a start and kind of give us your background? You know, Dylan kind of gave us the high-level overview, but frankly, I didn't even know you started in architecture, so you learn something new every day.
All right. Yeah, I'll keep it pretty short. So I wanted to be an architect since like 5th grade because I love to draw by hand. And I went to school in Chicago at IIT, and at that time, everything was done by hand. And when I finally graduated, after it was a 5-year program, and I took 1 extra year and did a co-op. And when I finally graduated, it was still everything was done by hand architecturally. But my co-op, I was worked for a year with R. Donnelly and Son, and worked on AutoCAD and worked with all of their interior design. And so I got to learn a little bit about computers and where things were going. And that was in the early 90s. So when I graduated in 93, I did 1 drawing by hand, ink on Mylar. And then they took all the drafting tables out and put computers in front of us. And that just started from there. So, I mean, that was AutoCAD, you know, it's 2D line work. So it was kind of similar to what all of us had done before. But what I saw then was that there was intelligence in the computer, right, that a pencil or, you know, ink on Mylar couldn't do. So just early on in the mid 90s, I would go to like Autodesk University and start talking to them about what I saw, what needed to be happening with AutoCAD to help architects. And along the way, you know, Autodesk has developed over the years, but in the mid 90s, Peter Beck formed an initiative inside of the Beck Group, a very large construction company, and developed the Beck Technology division. We're 25 years old as far as a company, Beck Technology, and originally it was formed as an initiative to support a large construction firm. And I don't think Beck is alone in that. I mean, I've come across many firms over the years that have had initiatives or technology focused areas to help their business, right? And the kind of the cool part, just to kind of fast forward, is change career paths after 5 years because I was frustrated as a young architect that as I drew in AutoCAD, I couldn't get the cost of what the line was. I couldn't get the cost of any of these items, and everything was always over budget. but why would an architect not, why should I care about that? Well, because I don't want to draw again, right? I'd rather just draw it right the first time if possible. And that's really kind of the visions that Peter Beck and Beck Technologies had for many, many years, is to break down the silos of, I'm just going to draw and then throw it over the fence to some construction firm for them to estimate. They throw it back over the fence. It's too expensive. Start through the process, throw it back over the fence. And there's got to be some ways to be, lean initiatives. All this has been going on for probably 25 years or more. I mean, just the evolution of coming from paper into the computer system on architecture. The same thing happened in construction as well, right? Like, used to be slide rules, and then it went to TI calculators, and then finally when it got to computers, maybe it was Excel or Lotus 1-2-3 and then Excel. Like, it has these logical progressions. But I think all of the industry, and I see it more so with construction than architecture at the moment, is that construction is thinking about these lean initiatives and ways to repurpose their data so that it doesn't just have these siloed pieces of information that can never be shared across disciplines or even inside of a construction company. So I think, Matt, you and Dylan, young and energetic and embrace technology. A lot of the construction companies embrace it now, I think, very well. And they either have initiatives like what Beck Technology has been, or they have folks inside incubating the ideas that can be successful. And that's happened not only from the software side, but also when you think about out in the field and how BIM and total stations and even drones, like all kinds of hardware technology is helping the industry as a whole. And that's what I think what I've seen over 25 years of doing this, both in architecture and then now as a technologist, is we're looking to figure out a way to streamline the process and share the data. There are things that are intellectual property, obviously, that you can't really expose externally, but there's quite a bit of data that can be shared, and I think that's what all clients would want, right? Is they're coming to a specific construction team or firm and have the confidence that they can deliver on time, on budget, and that they're not being taken advantage of. That, like, somehow there's a history of justifying how they got to their costs.
Yeah, you just dropped a whole lot of nuggets there that we could unpack.
Okay.
But the biggest one, I think, is this sharing of data concept, and it shouldn't be a foreign thing to us. But honestly, I think there's still that old school mentality in a lot of architecture firms and a lot of contracting firms where we don't play well in the same sandbox yet. What you guys are doing there at Beck, and I know this from my experience, previously when we met, Doug, that it's like it's the epitome of getting everybody on the same team almost. Yep. And I think it's so crucial. And Dylan and I talk about this all the time, about that rift, that definite line between the design guys and the construction guys, right? It's always been there, and it'll always be there. But at the end of the day, we're all working towards the same goal. And if we can start or recognize that maybe we don't have to start at zero anymore, because there's guys like you, there's firms like Beck Tech that have been around for quite some time now, pushing this to the forefront. I think we as an industry would be a whole lot better off.
Definitely. And it is tough, right? Because in the architecture firm that I worked for, they had standards, drafting standards to that were enforced to make their lives more efficient inside of the discipline. But all of a sudden you go to a different architecture firm, it's different standards. It is very difficult when it's somewhat of a homegrown or it was developed, and this happens quite frequently on the estimating side, that I'm sure Dylan, you and Matt have come across as well, is that for construction firms that maybe, jump from a TI calculator into Lotus and then into Excel, there were some Excel wizards that could build up really great macros and start to get some efficiencies. But it's all file based, and if that person left the firm, maybe the macro doesn't work anymore, or maybe Microsoft changes Excel enough that there's all this maintenance to try to keep your estimating system alive and living. And then of course, there's always, when folks either come or go, you could lose that intellectual capital, like lose what these Excel files really meant to people. And it's very, very hard because those files are all fragmented. So industry wise, if there were ways to share on common forms, then you're at least not having to start the process from ground zero every time.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of processes that firms build around one person, right? Somebody took the initiative to build something, and that person owns it, and they get delegated as the whatever it is, right? The estimating guy, the BIM guy, the whatever in the firm, and it never kind of leaves that. But one thing I kind of wanted to go back to was in firms creating their own kind of technology, the silo, and really even the start of Beck. Over the years, there have been a number of firms that have done this in some way, shape, or form. And really, it's few and far between. Like SOM back in late 90s, early 2000s had their own like Revit 3D engine that they spent, millions of dollars on. And there's been a few other construction companies that have done, some of these tech incubators. Obviously, it's worked out for Beck in that it's its own company now. But how have you seen this? I'm a big fan of it. I started a small like R&D department in one of the firms that I work for, doing like Oculus Rift and the whole VR kind of world, and walking through a model with an Xbox controller in the 2014. So with a lot of this, I see it as being very beneficial, but at the same time, the vast majority, I would say, because really when you talk about R&D departments or these innovation groups, you're talking a handful of firms that do anything of that. So for the firms that you've seen to be successful in that, like what was maybe the catalyst for them to come and be successful versus stuck in the ways of this is how we've always done it?
Yeah, that's a really great one, because that's kind of pivoting into kind of what do I see as a future, and maybe my crystal ball is as fuzzy as anyone else's. But the biggest challenge that I have seen over the years, especially if you're doing your own homegrown stuff, is that unless you have vast resources or deep ways of understanding the technology, you're going to be using off-the-shelf products, right? You're going to either use Excel or maybe using a Beck technology application. Like you're using off-the-shelf stuff. Now, it just depends upon when the technology was developed as to how interoperable or relatable it is to other data points or data systems. And that's what Matt, you and Dylan are talking about. You want to get the architecture team involved. And maybe they're all very sophisticated Revit users, but maybe the Revit models just aren't modeled to a way that an estimating team or a construction team could consume or use those models, right? Because those were design intent models, and they may not have the fidelity or the data that is necessary for estimators to feel comfortable, or estimating teams to feel like they could quantify. I think we're getting there. We are moving that direction. And ultimately, one of the things that makes this really powerful for everyone is, rather than file-based systems, you need to go with cloud-based or server or database-driven systems, because database-driven systems have a really powerful way of maintaining consistency in the data, and of course translating the data. And when you can do that, then whether one firm, as I was talking about with an architecture firm, certain pen weights were based upon color. If you have a way of translating that type of data into somebody else's source, then you can utilize it. It doesn't just die on the vine as a point in time, and it has to be reconstructed or rebuilt in the next one. And so I think long term, for all, for the construction industry as a whole, need to think about integration, what areas can be integrated for efficiencies. How can you find common standards or common ground? And if you can't find the common ground, do you have some way of translating the data so what's in one source has some sort of equivalent in the other source? So that's probably a direction to be thinking about in the future. Is it start to go away from kind of flat files and work in an environment, a collaboration environment, minimum collaboration. And if you could find integration where the tools are ubiquitous and talking to one another, then you're miles ahead.
Yeah, in there, I mean, there's definitely a lot in there, and I don't necessarily disagree with it. The thing that has always been the sticking point, and until we kind of iron out some contracts, I don't know how it becomes beneficial, right? To like a design firm or even a construction firm. So if a design firm changes everything that they do to easily throw it over the fence, right? So they invest all this time and money, and it might make it easier on their construction partners. So now the construction firm benefits from all the work that the architecture firm did, right? And I think there's some of that hesitancy, right, in a big investment to where it doesn't necessarily pay back to the design firm, which is also why you're seeing more design build come up, because now a construction firm can see the benefit directly to their bottom line. To one, they absorb the fee of design, and they can streamline their construction process. So without, I think, contracts or owners being, I think, more savvy is the other thing in here that a lot of people miss out on. Is an owner just wants a building. They don't care how it gets done. Just, I need a hospital, like make it happen. They don't understand like the process in it, which is its own, I think, again, it's a contractual issue is what some of this really comes down to. As much as we would not like to admit that, it's nobody's forced to go one way or the other, because it's, some of this is not to the benefit of one party, ultimately, being the owner's ultimate interest. But I think there's some lack in there. Not to be a downer on it. I think there's obviously solutions to it. It just contractually doesn't always fly.
You're spot on that. I mean, it is very hard to if you're not contractually obligated, it's very hard to try to lean in towards the center and provide maybe a little bit of work on this side, though I'm not contractually obligated to do it. May help people downstream. I think one thing that I have seen, it's not prevalent yet, but very techie or forward-thinking owners asking for collaboration and integration helps kind of process of, well, let's look at what the contracts need to be so that data can be shared. Like they're kind of, you can try to do it as many, probably all three of us have tried to move initiatives forward inside of the sphere of influence that you have, and that's great. But how does that how can your innovative ideas sometimes get really mainstream and somehow organically take off, right? And part of that is that when it comes, as you said, Dylan, hey, I'm an owner and I need a hospital built. How you get there, it really doesn't really matter to me, but I need a hospital by this time because that's their business, right? They have no interest at all about what's the design component to that and how do they do it and how do they execute it? What's the construction component to that? And all the other ancillary items that have to go into it as well. But I think, taking a step back, looking at a kind of a more holistic overview of the AEC industry it's a three-legged stool, right? You've got an owner that needs a product. You've got a design firm or practitioner that knows that the design process, knows the standards and the city codes and all, like that's their discipline. And then you've got the construction team that is going to put it into place. I have seen, and it's been successful. It's successful with Beck. There's integrated contracts, right? The architect and the contractor are under the same contract in the same house, right? I have seen, and we worked with a couple clients that the developer or the owner has a captured architecture and construction group. I would say that that's probably one of the most powerful ways to streamline the process, because the owner developer knows what their product type is. They're in business to deliver on a certain exterior or a usage that they know what their quality, what they're expecting, and the design firm that's captured by that follows those standards. They don't deviate from it because it's simply a product type that they go after. They're not a multidisciplinary firm that does everything. They have very focused markets, and they can fine tune their models for maximum delivery, right? And the same thing can happen on the construction side. Then is that, and actually just before this call, I was on a training class and with a firm kind of similar that has the ability to interrogate the Revit models and look at those models and understand them as they relate to cost and say, oh, some things are not really where they need to be. Let's go ahead and circle back around with all team members and understand, if you do a little bit more here, this helps everyone. Now, again, bigger picture, when you're looking at the siloed disciplines that are out there, that gets a lot harder. There's no doubt about it. But I do think that over time, and again, my crystal ball is really fuzzy, but maybe 5 years out, that there would be some sort of consistencies that folks would kind of say, hey, this makes sense because I've been working with the construction teams or these specific owners over and over again, and they've grown it, they've innovated it or organically developed certain processes that can be highly repeatable and usable. I'm not saying that they have to be industry standards, because I think that makes it even harder if you're saying, all right, let's lay out the entire industry flat on a piece of paper. Then it becomes really hard to think about the different disciplines and what their needs are. And even if you looked at different market sectors, it becomes even more challenging to figure out, well, what's so important about a hospital as opposed to a parking structure? And are there things that are common, and are there things that are unique? And where could we find those standards? So it's going to be a challenge for many, many years, because I just don't know overall if there could be any sort of unified industry standard. But I think just repeating because a lot of us work with clients, that's the repeat business, right? We're working and we're getting efficiencies on that level.
Yeah, and from the construction side, we work with architecture and engineering groups very, very frequently, because we've found guys or women, groups that we kind of gel with. Yep. And we approach a lot of it as design build, but it's still that team environment. And I think you guys both kind of hit it, in that really some of that change has to start above and beyond the three of us. It has to start at the owners and the developer level, because those folks are still going off of the old good, fast, cheap triangle, and you can only pull that triangle in so many directions and keep it equilateral. And
yes,
for us all to survive and to be productive and be happy, because we all still have to make a living, you have to keep those legs sort of in plane with each other. And until we get some sort of recognition that these projects take time, they cost real dollars. There's only so much we can do as a designer, as a developer, as a contractor. We can't make it free. We can't make it ridiculously fast. There's definite limits on this, and it's just it's an interesting conundrum because, I don't know if we ever solve it, but I think getting towards that direction is helpful, certainly.
Yeah, I think the big thing that you hit on there too, both Doug and Matt, is standards, but the standards have to be driven from the owner, right? So like a hospital group, which I've worked with a few, when they have design standards, things flow a heck of a lot easier. This is what we want. This is what we're going to approve. This is how we're going to move forward. You don't do this, no go, right? It makes things very, very cut and dry. And I think that's what a lot of entities, right, owners are missing. But then again, when you look at, let's take school districts, they build the vast majority of school districts build one building every 20 years. The same people are not there for the last building as were there for this building. And a lot of like government things, it's just, you don't have the same people typically because their build cycles are 20, 25, 50 years. Where hospitals build stuff all the time. Something is always under construction in a hospital versus, a school or anything like that. Frankly, a lot of them, they're either building new ones or tearing down the old ones. That's the extent of most of those things. So and then, higher ed's a little different. They're somewhere in the middle for that. But the other thing that I want to come back to a little bit is on cost. So I totally agree to the point of an engineer and architect, as they're drawing things, they have no idea what things cost. It's not their job to know-ish, right? Like in a way it is, but it's not. And what are some ways, some tactics other than, once every 6 months when a project comes to bid, they see like, well, this one's over. I don't know why, but what do we do here? But what might be some ways, in traditional BIM, right, using Revit, or I say traditional, the last 5 years of BIM, but like what might be some ways for the design team to try to understand costs a little better in their designing? Obviously, on the construction side, estimators are in the numbers, day in, day out. The construction team is really dealing with the hard costs of things on a daily basis, where the design team sees it, at SD, DD, and CD review and VE, right? Phase 4. So what might be some tactics for everybody out there really to kind of understand costs at a little better level?
That's a great one. Dylan, we've pivoted at Beck Tech to adding all the estimates into a central database. And it doesn't have to be one. It could be, I've got a couple of clients that have regional estimate databases, but all of those regional databases you could use products like Power BI or Domo or Tableau or MicroStrategies. There's all these types of visualizers that allow you to look at big data sets and start to either normalize the data or slice the data in such a way that it could be interpreted by an executive all the way down to, maybe it is an intern architect that's trying to pick up some red lines and they would like to understand at some sort of rudimentary level what they're seeing, and to be able to have a project team that, and again, whether it's owner driven or not, maybe it's a construction firm that just says they want to lean in and provide some data to the design firm that, hey, here's a dashboard of the past 5 projects that we've done with you. I mean, again, if it's a highly repeatable relationship, like I know that Matt has done in some of his ventures, that you can start to have those deeper conversations about, hey, you're kind of starting to get to a threshold, so let's try to figure out how to solve without going over, right? So I think visualizers, BI applications are a good way to do that, because those are pretty agnostic, right? That you're only just pointing to a data source and then deciding how you want to present that data source. And that's probably something that for Matt and Dylan and others is, if you're not exploring that kind of BI space, I would say most firms that I've come across, their accounting group has, like, it may not be as prevalent using estimates to do to source Power BI data at the moment. That's just because in many cases the data still lives in files, and it's very hard to aggregate that data or curate the data and condition the data so that it could be useful. But that's an initiative that Beck Tech has been working on to kind of bridge that one, so that it is more consumable and accessible to all parties. Again, it comes down to how much data do you want to share, but a dashboard that is only read only is just that, right? It's just conveying data, and it then can start a conversation. Should I go this way? Should I go that way?
And the conversation piece is huge in this, because I tell many of my prospective clients that what we do at Schaefer, we're not pricing anything. We're simply going out and gathering what the market is already priced at, right? I mean, we all have our own strategies and our own different markups here and there, but for the most part, it's relationship based, because we're all looking at the same set of data, hypothetically anyway.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
to be able to grab that data in a way that everyone can understand it, from the intern architect up to the executive and the CEO level, it helps that conversation, and it helps build that relationship. When you do both of those in concert with each other, now we're building buildings, and the three of us are real happy. It's part of that ever evolving communication, if you will. And the more data we can communicate to our clients, the better we're all at. And the more data that the designers can communicate to me, the better we're at it. And it just keeps, and they're all spokes on a wheel.
Exactly. I mean, and that's actually the greatest visualizer that you could have is the spokes on the wheel, right? That everyone has a role to play to support the wheel. And if there are ways that you can actually centralize or share the data into the center of the wheel, you're at that hub then that enables kind of free access to the data, and then either withdraw what they need or embellish it more with what they can lend to the table.
And I think with this, it's also time is a big piece of this, right? Do you have the right information at the right time for the right people, which is that whole communication piece. So when you're thinking about a deliverable, because that's typically what everybody thinks in, right? On the design side, SD, CD, or DD, CD, and then the whole CA phase, and, from dirt being dug to, steel top out to certificate of occupancy, right? Like those are some of the big milestones on the construction side, but is to have the right information at the right time throughout a project. And sometimes the sooner that you can get a lot of that, the better choices you can make. Obviously in design, the sooner that you can make some of these big sweeping choices or changes to a model, for massing, right? Like, do we have too much concrete in this thing, right? To how many seats we have in a stadium, to how many beds we have in a hospital or a dorm room. Those big choices made early in the project matter a whole lot more than, or are less costly, let's put it that way, less costly early than they are later. And, having technology, having tools, that's a lot of what we build at Cowabunga Studios, is the tool to get you there faster. Yeah. But through a lot of this, it's, do you have the data? And I think with BIM, we have the data. Then it's, can you see it, right? Are you using anything? And design firms historically have been very, I'm going to say gun shy, but liability shy is really the big choice there. But, liability conscious in sharing quantities, right?
Yeah.
To do quantity takeoffs, because the model's not right. And this has been, I think, a big thing too, of point of contention, is sharing that model. Now is the design firm liable for counts quantities versus our traditional paper set, where this is now it's on the construction team to count everything versus having a table of quantities. So I don't ultimately know where that goes, but I just see most of the data is there,
Yep.
in a BIM model, so long as it's modeled correctly, which we can spend a day talking about that. But
Yes.
the data is there. And then from this, are you seeing, or, I mean, I know Beck's got its own platform, but seeing this to where that data gets shared out to everybody, and you contractually kind of mitigate some of the liability between everybody to do that? Or how do you see, this is again kind of going back to some contractual early questions, but in that, and that's really just where I end up seeing the bottleneck is in that contract, not necessarily, and for liability on both sides.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer that well, because I think it is contractual on a case-by-case basis. And if we just holistically say that as an industry as a whole, like the three of us, we are ambassadors to encourage the sharing of data and to encourage that kind of communication. And it may have to trickle up all the way to the top to obviously the firms that have they could get their risk management involved and try to figure out where are those lines and what can be shared. Just recently, I've been working with two clients that use our product, and they're going into a joint venture, and they're asking, well, what can we share and how can we share it? And the luxury that I have is that I know both of their data sets without exposing one to the other, right? Like I can see where there's a common thread, and then where there is intellectual property that needs to be not discarded, but sheltered or not applied to provided to the other. And so just kind of sharing with them what they should do and how they should do it so that they can actually collaborate. That's just one, two construction firms doing a joint venture, but that's not the only ones. There's many of them, and they are looking for ways to get to that common thread. And obviously it has to go through risk and all the other things so that it makes sense contractually on all sides. So yeah, Dylan, you raise a really good point, is that it does come down in those senses to what can be shared. I don't know if I don't have any really great answers other than to look for integrated platforms, or platforms that interface the data more seamlessly, as opposed to siloed data, because the siloed data model, I think that was the way it had to go in the beginning when things were all PC based and then PC to server, and we're having to get to the point where we have to just be able to have the data in either in a cloud or in a shared environment that a JV or this design firm and this owner can see the same data set and provide the value or provide the information in a timely manner. As you said, Dylan, I mean, making the decisions up front and knowing what the cost implication of the decision is gives you a better rate of success of being able to deliver the product on time, on budget. And I know internally with Beck that their healthcare division, as you said, Dylan, is something that can do that type of work, because it's very, very consistent in standards that healthcare providers have, and so it's a highly repeatable play.
I know we can go a lot of ways here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dylan.
And through all this too, I mean, we bring up contracts a lot, and again, not to have the answer necessarily, but I think it's for everyone out there to have the conversations within their own organization on what their best practice is, what comfortable what risk level they're comfortable with in a lot of this, what they're comfortable in sharing. So it's really for all of you out there to bring up this within your own organization, to find ways to make it comfortable for you, with risk, with tolerances, with everything that you're going through, and not necessarily that we have the answers. There's a lot of solutions out there that you can use to help you make these decisions, but ultimately you have to be comfortable with whatever risk or liability, and your insurance agent and all that stuff are gonna, get on together to move forward. And it's having that conversation with the owner, with your construction team, with the design team, right? And everybody getting on the same page, getting that done contractually. It's a little easier with like an IPD project, or in CMC. Like some of these contractual things are a little easier to share data within because everyone's under one contract. But it's to ultimately just have the conversation about information, data, sharing. Are we okay with quantities? Is that going to help takeoffs, right? Do we just give them the BIM model, and the design team or the construction team and estimating team can pull all the information out of it to then put a schedule together and add quantities quicker than anything else that they're doing? So I don't think there's one true answer, just like there's not one true answer in construction in general, but it's to have the conversation with everybody across, at least the heads of the three companies, right? Owner, contractor, and design team, and however that might be structured. You got 6 people or whatever, but to have those conversations.
Definitely. And I think to have those conversations, and I've used this over many, many years, is begin with the end in mind. A Franklin Covey habit, which is like your ultimate goal, and maybe it does help then get to the point of getting everyone around the table and being willing to see if there's a way to work together, is making sure that everyone that is seated at the table is buying into the same goal. What does success look like to this project team? And as long as that type of kind of early development comes across, and it could come across from the owner, it could come across from the design team, or it could come across from the construction team. Somebody brings up, hey, have we ever thought about doing something like this, and possibly exploring in some cases, and being willing to fail, but know early on, like, well, let's explore this type of technology, and we got 3 weeks, 6 weeks to determine whether or not this would be successful for this team. Then I think it's those types of things as well. There's contracts and all the other stuff, but it's really being able to make sure that the players that are on the team are, as you said before, all pulling the same way. Like, it's not a 3-way tug of war. It should be everyone pulling the same direction, so that you have the most efficiencies on the backside. But it begins with that end in mind. Like, this is the primary goal. If it's not that, and sometimes everyone has their own reason to be on the team and all that. I think having some tension on a team, I've seen that be very successful. But I think you have to have the respect of each discipline to understand. I don't have to know how to design, or I don't have to be an expert cost estimator, or I don't really have to understand the product type that I'm trying to deliver. But it does help if you could at least appreciate what does a hospital need, or what does a construction firm need, or what does the design team need, in order to have everyone pulling from the same side. Is probably more than anything, it's what you've all talked about, is the relationships, right? Technology is an enabler. It enables you to do something more, but it certainly isn't the gun to the people's head to say you will do it this way. Technology can't do that. You can either choose to use it or not do it, right? I mean, it's the the old adage of lead the horse to the water. I mean, ultimately, technology is only leading you there. You as a group have to decide what you're going to use from that and what you can share. Again, outside of that, the risks and the contracts is just another level of thinking, but definitely, or something to definitely be cognizant of. but having Dylan, you and Matt, and multiple, I mean, I've met so many fantastic people over the years that are so energetic, so enthusiastic to solving real world problems and increasing efficiencies, making things more consistent, more centrally shared, so that it isn't well, let's just throw it over the fence and let's hope it works. I mean, that type of mentality is just so difficult to manage, because it then is just a seesaw, right? Nope, draw it again. Okay, nope, draw it again. I mean, there's no value in that.
You bring up another great point there. I mean, we're all problem solvers by design. That's what we all do, and it kind of segues into a question I ask a lot of our guests. And frankly, when I ask the construction guys, I know what the answer is going to be. So it's always interesting to me personally when I ask guys from either the design side or the tech side, what do you, Doug, see as the single biggest, or at least one of the largest issues facing our collective industry today?
I wish you would have sent that to me beforehand so I could have chewed on it for a little while. Biggest challenge in the industry?
And some of this too. So I'll give you a reprieve here so you can think on it. But is some of the challenges that might come up, and it could be from your side, right? From the design technology side, maybe it's use cases, maybe it's getting people to work together. But because ultimately what we're driving at here is we need to identify the problem first so that we can ultimately solve it. And this is the thing, right? A lot of people will talk about problems. A lot of people will hammer on the wrong nail, but they will never get out a hammer, right? They'll point out the nail, but they will never actually hammer it in. It won't solve the problem. So, from that, what are you seeing? And then we can talk about some of the solutions, the things to help to push that thing forward.
Okay. Well, just from a technologist point of view, I think, and I've been mentioning it along the way, is that having silos or having flat files is that is going to fade away at some point, because some Excel file that has a macro that does some really cool stuff, that was innovative, 25 years ago or 20 years ago, or possibly even up to 15 or 10 years ago. And it could win projects, right? It could sell a client to show that you are technically savvy and edgy, and that you could consume and reuse and repurpose data. But I think ultimately the biggest challenge, Matt, as you put it point blank to me, is that it's the fragmentation of the data sets, even with inside of any firm, right? Whether it's a construction firm that is using Excel or some other estimating tools that are single purpose, like it's like a TI calculator. It just does that, but you need it to do more than that. That maybe that's kind of where I'm going with it, is that to finding technical or adopting technical solutions that have multiple inlets and outlets, kind of similar to that of an iPhone, right? Like before an iPhone, a phone was a phone, and yeah, you might have had a camera on it, but the iPhone, all of a sudden, this innovation of, well, you could have any host of apps and all this other stuff, and create new business models that didn't exist before it. And then, oh, by the way, it also has a phone and a camera. Oh, okay, that's kind of cool. I mean, it's that kind of thing is sometimes looking at from the construction and architecture and mostly the owner developer is thinking about not to invent the next iPhone, but thinking about how do we come to the center and share the data set. And again, ultimately, that would mean that there somebody is willing to host the source data, whether that's, hey, a design firm is always using BIM 360 and they're posting up their models weekly or something like that, and that the construction firm is willing to point to that hub and look at it, interrogate the data, use what they can, and then come to the meetings and say, hey, we've noticed this, and this, or this is missing. It's that kind of open communication, but it has to come from firms that are innovative, that have folks like you guys that have been incubating the ideas and willing to kind of risk it on a project and see if it has some merit.
I think that's a great answer, Doug. I mean,
Okay.
It's a problem. It all comes down to communication, right? And I think, what Dylan and I are doing as an overall goal here is we're trying to fix all these problems in the industry, right? And that's why we have varied guests from different backgrounds, different professional tracks. The construction side of it, we have this huge shortage of skilled labor and of trade-based learning at younger ages. But really, I think, and we've touched on it 15 times already today, it comes down to communication, and we have to figure out how to talk with each other, whether it's through teaching young kids about the trades or grabbing data sets from the industries and sharing amongst the three of us. If we keep doing things the way that they've always been done, we'll never get anywhere farther.
Very true.
So I know we're pushing up against the clock here, but I appreciate you coming on, Doug. It's been great to reconnect a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So where can people find you if they want to reach out and connect?
Well, you can certainly go to beck-technology.com, and that's our main website. And my name here, Doug Maiden. I mean, that's just Doug Maiden at beck-technology.com. Anyone wants to get any more information from my take, be happy to respond back to them. And ultimately, Matt, the reason why I came on is of the relationship that you and I have, and that you said, hey, Doug, would you be willing to do this? Sure. There's other folks. Stuart Carroll is our president CEO of Beck Technology, and then Michael Bourne is our CTO. I mean, they can talk for an hour or so more about technical details that are at a different level. As a former practitioner, as an architect, I think my passion is always in the weeds, in the trenches of solving the challenges on a client by client basis. So most of our clients are construction firms, and so they've got processes in place, but we need to unify the data. And so my background as in the beginning, as I studied architecture, I studied city regional planning as well as architecture. So being able to think at the macro level and understand the vision from somebody, whether some visionary inside of a firm or the client has the vision, but at the same time understand the details, the technical details of putting something together at the architectural level. That's been my hopefully a contribution to the industry. But I've learned so much by actually working with you, Matt, and others that would tell me what the cost of something is. Go, okay, well, then maybe I shouldn't. When I think back at the macro level, maybe we should be thinking of a different direction, and we're looking at the detailed level. Let's go a different direction. So it's been a fantastic journey. It's always great to do what you just said, and that's to have that open channel of communication, to always be willing to learn from somebody.
Yeah, and for those of you who haven't checked out, especially Deprofiler, I would suggest taking a look at it. It does some really amazing stuff. Doug, you pretty well built it out of your own brainchild, right? Whether you'll be too humble to admit it, but can you tell us anything without sharing any secrets? Obviously, what big is on the horizon? What's the next thing?
Yeah, I could. So I will. I can't take credit for. I contributed as much as many folks at Beck Tech contributed to Destiny Profiler. I would tell you that the reason why I left architecture is when I had an interview with Peter Beck, and Peter was coming from the construction side and knows a lot about construction, and I'm coming from the architecture side, saying I simply just want to know, as I draw a line, what it costs, what the cost per linear foot is, and I don't know that. And so Destiny Profiler, Matt, it was fantastic to introduce it to you and to others up in Michigan that have utilized it well. And it's a fantastic tool, but it is a tool that had a specific purpose in project pursuit and understanding that macro level of what the cost impact is of a decision. And it couldn't go downstream past, say, schematic design. It just, the amount of time to trying to tighten up the cost or anything like that, it had a diminishing return on investment. And so, yeah, great that you pitch, hey, take a look at it. But our focus has been now since about 2012 is developing the entire project continuum as opposed to simply rough order of magnitude of project pursuit. And so Destiny Estimator is that it's a continuum application that is going to have additional functionality built into it over the years, and including at some point in the future. Again, my fuzzy 5-year crystal ball, somewhere in the future, maybe there is a way to bring in the same types of elements that Profiler has been doing for years, but in a more modern platform that is kind of web enabled. You do not have to be worried about a specific type of hardware or anything. You just log in and start evaluating the data. And it's not to eliminate a designer, it's not to eliminate an estimator. It's to bring people to the center and talk about the vision of the project. I know that was very ambiguous. Like, I'm not telling you any features anywhere, anything out, but we do have a product roadmap, and I certainly would suggest that, and I'll suggest to Stuart and Michael that maybe they would like to come on at some point in the future and talk high level about some of the other visions. But I really appreciate being welcomed as a guest to talk about it at a more practitioner level, and really roll up the sleeves and work with estimators and teams to try to find better solutions for the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure Dylan and I would welcome those guys on at some time in the future. And believe me, I work with a tech guy. I wouldn't expect you to give away any secrets. So I appreciate the answer you gave us.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I think this is the other thing too, just real quick as we wrap up here, is understanding that technology isn't, as much as some might say, intended to replace your people, right? It's intended to enable your people to do their jobs. Everybody's overwhelmed as it is in construction, right? It's either feast or famine. And when it's feast, nobody's sleeping, nobody's doing well at all. Doug, you're as gray as they come, and probably earlier than most. I was gray early in my career. So at that point too, like a lot of this tech is to really help people end up just being happier, right? Not stressed about the projects, not too worried about getting things out the door. So it's not intended to bring or to replace anybody. Again, we can't find enough people in the industry as it is. So a lot of technology is to help people just do their jobs, do it the best they can, not to replace them, but to really enable people to do great work and continue to stay in this industry, that we all love.
Definitely. I think that's something that's internal to Beck Technology is our core values of passion, innovation, and caring. And it starts with us internally. We care about each other, and we encourage each other to look across the firm and help wherever you can, and make sure that people's lives are enriched, right? And their families matter, and getting home at a reasonable hour so that you can maybe put your child to bed. I mean, like, all those things are ubiquitous to anybody, right? They whether you're a designer, whether you're in an estimator, or even an owner, like, you ultimately want to be with your family and do the things that are important, but at the same time, many of us, and I have this affliction to a way, is I live to work in some case because I'm really passionate about wanting to make it better. And so you have to find that ground. But that's what Dylan, you're so spot on, is that technology is not to put you out of business. It's to help you hopefully sleep better and have more time with friends and family.
Absolutely. And guys, go check out Doug, go follow him. We'll put all your links here in the comments below. And just again, to recap, I mean, it's about communication. It's about having open, honest conversations, with everybody up and down the chain, across, to really allow you to make better decisions sooner. Not necessarily more decisions, but better decisions with better information sooner in the process, in the project, to communicate effectively, confidently across the project. And technology, whether that's Beck or ours or somebody else's, it's the way to get out there to show that, hey, this is why we made a decision, how we got here, and how we're all going to move forward. So thank you, Doug, so much for coming on and sharing your story. Matt and I both really appreciate it. And guys, until next time, that's this episode of the Construction Corner Podcast.
Thank you.